Hey guys, welcome to this week's lesson from our biology book, chapter 2, section 3, where we talk about the cycling of matter. We know that organisms need energy. Some make their own from the sun, some get energy from eating and drinking. Today we're going to talk about how energy cycles through systems. We have a statement here that says essential nutrients are cycled through biogeochemical processes. And we're going to look into what all that means. But I want you guys to take a minute and stop and think about what you already know about energy, how it's obtained, and how you think it probably cycles through the environment. So push pause and think about that for a good minute. All right, hopefully you had a chance to think about that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How does energy cycle through the environment? Our essential questions today are: how do nutrients move through biotic and abiotic parts of an ecosystem? Why are nutrients important to living organisms? And what are the biogeochemical cycles of nutrients and how are they alike? If you can answer those three things when you're done with this lesson, you are extremely good to go. First, let's talk about some of these cycles here. Natural processes in our environment cycle matter and nutrients through the biosphere. Matter, which we already know what matter is anything that takes up space and has a mass. A nutrient is a chemical substance that organisms need to obtain from its environment in order to survive. So you got to have nutrients to survive. Now, the cycling of nutrients through the biosphere involves both living organisms and physical processes, and the exchange of matter through the biosphere is called the biogeochemical cycle. It's a big process that's never ending. It involves living things, non-living things, organisms, bodies of water, soil, the ground, the sun, like all kinds of stuff goes into it. And we're going to look at that. First, we're going to look at the water cycle. So water, if you look at this picture, we can see kind of the way things move from where to where in this cycle. But water evaporates from bodies of water, from groundwater, from the soil, from organisms, and it returns from the atmosphere in the form of precipitation. All living organisms rely on fresh water, which constitutes only about 3% of the water on Earth. So think of how covered in water the Earth is, but only 3% of it is consumable. So if you look at this picture, we can see water is going to evaporate from all the places on the Earth, make its way up into the atmosphere. Precipitation is going to accumulate and drop back down. It's just a big cycle. It leaves the Earth into the atmosphere, leaves the atmosphere back into the Earth. Organisms drink it, organisms get rid of it in their waste, and it just goes back into the ground, and then it gets evaporated again, and then it all starts all over. That's why we call it a cycle. It just repeats itself over and over. If you need to stop and look at this picture for a moment to see the different parts of the cycle, go ahead and pause and do that. Okay, next we have the carbon and oxygen cycles. Living things on Earth are carbon-based creatures. We are made of carbon. We have other stuff, obviously, but carbon is a big part of what makes us. Animals, humans, plants. Now think about what you already know. For one of the things that's very important for us to sustain life, we know that we have to breathe. We have to breathe air. So plants, one of the things they do is let off oxygen when they do photosynthesis, and we need that oxygen. We breathe that oxygen. And when we inhale that oxygen, afterwards we exhale carbon dioxide. So our waste product is carbon dioxide. Plants' waste product is oxygen. Now think about that. Plants put off oxygen, we breathe it in. We put off carbon dioxide, plants take it in. And over and over and over. So that is a cycle once again. So carbon and oxygen often make up molecules essential for life, and that's what I just said. Carbon and oxygen recycle relatively quickly through living organisms, and carbon and oxygen enter a long-term cycle when dead material is buried. So dead things go into the ground and decompose and become basically part of the ground. And It repeats the cycle over again. It puts off carbon, plants take that in, plants put off oxygen, we take that in, we put off carbon, plants take that in. So just if you look at this picture, you can see all the different directions that carbon and oxygen go in the carbon and oxygen cycle. This is another very important cycle that occurs on Earth. Next, we have the nitrogen cycle. The capture and conversion of nitrogen into a form that is usable by plants is called nitrogen fixation. Now, there's lots of nitrogen all over the place, but it has to be in a very specific form to be used by plants. So this process called nitrogen fixation comes in and turns nitrogen into usable nitrogen. So nitrogen is fixed by bacteria or electrical storms. These are two different things that can transform it into the necessary nitrogen for plants. Nitrogen returns to the atmosphere through denitrification. So bacteria converts fixed nitrogen back into nitrogen gas. This comes from waste products, poop and pee. Think about what you know about fertilizer. Fertilizer is basically animal poop, and it's full of this. It's full of nitrogen. Bacteria fixes it during nitrogen fixation into usable nitrogen that plants need. So the nitrogen cycle is yet another cycle that is important in the Earth's environment. Next, we have the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus is also essential for the growth and development of organisms. Phosphorus cycles quickly as phosphates through sediments, plants, and consumers. So it makes its way through rocks and minerals and then it's consumed. So it makes its way through plants and animals as well. Long-term phosphorus is weathered or eroded from rocks and then added into the cycle. So it makes its way, drains into the water. It's consumed. Animals consume it, plants consume it. Then when the waste products occur, it leaves in the waste products and starts the cycle all over again. You can kind of stop and take a look at this picture again to see all the different directions that phosphorus cycles its way through our environment. And that's the last cycle we're going to look at today. Um, so if you guys need anything clarified, go back and look at some of those diagrams and read some of the meanings. If you need a little bit more clarification, you can rewind the video, you can look at the PowerPoint, and then when you're finished, make your way over to today's discussion board and respond to the prompt.